Hi there, I'm your host, John Ivison. I'm joined this week by my National Post colleagues, Terry Glavin and Sabrina Maddeaux. Welcome, folks.
Thank
Hey,
you.
John.
Our common bond beyond the Post is that we were all declared persona non grata by the Russian Federation last week. 3 of 61 Canadians who were sanctioned for poking Putin's criminal regime. And as far as I can determine, all that means is that we will never be able to visit Russia, but I don't know whether either of you think that we should be a little bit more nervous than that, wary of drinking tea with Russian visitors. Sabrina?
No, I'm not too nervous, and like you said, I don't have any plans to visit Moscow or anywhere else in Russia anytime soon, so for me, not losing any sleep over it right now.
Terry, have you read the fine print? I saw the translation. It did talk about further actions, and it wasn't clear to me whether it was further actions against us or further actions against other people.
Yeah, well, it's kind of sad, like I don't think I'll ever be able to go back to China. I don't know that I'll ever be able to go to Turkey again. And I won't be able to go back to Russia, and I actually find that quite upsetting. I mean, it is amusing, right? We want to have a laugh about it, but I'm kind of upset about that. I know the Russian Far East a little bit. I've never been to Moscow. I've been to bits of Siberia and Khabarovsk and Irkutsk and the Jewish Autonomous Oblast. There was such a thing.
Where?
Way the heck and gone out in the Heilongjiang River is the border between China and Russia.
Yeah.
It's on the Russian side of the Heilongjiang. And also Ulan-Ude, Buryatia. Nobody's ever heard of Buryatia. It's curious. I was there, actually. The very first piece that I ever filed to the Ottawa Citizen was about the rise of, it was springtime of the oligarchs about 15 years ago, and the obliteration of all of the small nations east of the Urals. And right. Here we are, and the Kremlin is attempting to do just that in the most wicked and violent way with Ukraine. So
I do think I take your point on China. I mean, I never think I don't think I'll ever go back to Hong Kong, which
that's a real sad
tragic.
Story.
Yeah, I agree with that. Hong Kong was one of my favorite cities. I've been multiple times, and unfortunately, I would not feel comfortable going back anytime in the foreseeable future. So I think it is a shame that as journalists, we're able to travel less and less freely.
I think that's going to be common with a lot more people, though. I mean, one of the consequences of this, and whatever follows in the Far East and Taiwan, is that our globe is shrinking for many of us. I mean, we think about the world as a village, but it's splitting into separate spheres, and never the twain. We should never cross them. Can I turn to the conflict? In recent days, I've been quite surprised by President Biden's boldness. It's not a word you would normally associate with Biden, I don't think. But initially the Americans reacted quite cautiously. They blocked the transfer of fighter jets from Poland to Ukraine. But since the fighting has moved to the east, they seem to have been emboldened. Concerns about escalation appear to have been erased in Washington. Biden's now pushing a $33 billion package of aid to support Ukraine. What do you make of this? Is Biden calling Putin's bluff? What do you think, Terry?
Well, I think that there's been a lot of, we talk about how NATO is unified, and Trudeau brings all of these cabinet ministers to Europe and does the kind of ABBA world reunion tour 2 or 3 weeks ago, and this business about a united front, I don't think there really has been. I don't think it has been that united. When you look at the way Poland talks, the way the Baltic states talk, the way the Czechs talk, that's not the way the French or the Germans talk. And you remember a couple of weeks ago when Biden said something like, that guy's got to go. And then there was a big flurry over the weekend where the State Department and the White House were issuing, cautions and denials, and no, we're not interested in regime change and all that sort of thing. I don't think there's actually been a clear understanding in Washington about what the end game is or was or should be. I recall the Biden's State of the Union address a few weeks ago, where he talked about how Putin is going to pay in the long run, and over time he will be made to sort of amortize his debt to the Ukrainian people and the rest of the world. What's happening now may be a kind of a coalescence of different views in the intelligence community in the States, the State Department and the White House and the Pentagon about what they're really up against. So, it's kind of late in the day, but I guess it's better than nothing.
Right. Sabrina, to Terry's point, Lloyd Austin went to Kiev, the Defense Secretary, U.S. Defense Secretary, and talked about our goal now being to weaken Russia's ability to wage war. And I think that was probably looked on a little bit askance in some European capitals, and probably in Ottawa too. It did sound like it wasn't quite just the defence of Ukraine. Do you think that the goalposts have shifted a little bit, and that the alliance is going to be weakened as a result?
I do think there's a recognition that Russia, especially under Putin, will be an ongoing threat. This will not be a one-time thing, even if Ukraine manages to stay independent. So I think we're seeing that shift in U.S. policy. As Terry said, though, a lot of it is just so late. This should have been done a long time ago, at the beginning of the invasion, if not before. And one of the measures, you mentioned there was a large aid package for Ukraine from the U.S., but something else significant they announced yesterday is they're going to be able to seize assets more easily, and they're also going to look to be able to sell those and put the proceeds back into Ukraine aid. And the other thing that's really big is that so far, all the sanctions have targeted oligarchs and their families, but they now actually want to be able to make it illegal to have any of the proceeds or profits of these kleptocrats, which means they're targeting enablers. That can be lawyers, finance professionals, real estate agents, anyone who is still working with these people, and that is key to really striking the financial heart of the matter.
So, Terry, while we're seeing the American line hardening, we're also seeing Putin's line hardening, and he's been talking about veiled threats about nuclear weapons, and obviously the Russians have cut off natural gas supplies to Poland and to Bulgaria. How do you see this playing out? Do you think there is a possibility that it could escalate even to the point of nuclear weapons being used?
Well, there is always the threat of the Russians doing something really, really awful. One of the things that I don't know that anybody noticed it, I wrote a small piece about it last weekend when Russia's ambassador to Canada, Oleg Stepanov, had communicated to both Justin Trudeau and the foreign minister Melanie Joly that the Russian intelligence was indicating that either it depends which sort of general you were listening to, that either the Americans or the Ukrainians were about to engage in some horrible false flag weapons of mass destruction event. And this is crazy. The guy that shouts the loudest about this sort of thing is Igor Kirillov. He's the chief of the Russian Radiation, Chemical and Biological Protection Force. He's been talking about this kind of stuff for ages. He's accused the Americans of sending wasps infected with African swine flu out of a public health research lab in Moldova. Anyway, the Russians are keeping that kind of conversation going because they know it terrifies people. And this has been a real frustration for President Zelensky. Because every time he says, could you close the skies, please? Could you help us close the skies? It doesn't matter that ever since March 3rd, he's basically said, I'm giving up on a NATO no-fly zone. Whenever he says you have to help us close the skies, the next thing you know, everybody's wetting their pants about, oh, he's asking for a NATO no-fly zone, which will mean an inevitable confrontation between an American F-35 and a Russian MiG-19, and that will inevitably cause Putin to go crazy, and he's going to reach for the red button, and it'll be nuclear holocaust. I really think we need to calm down about that, and we have to understand a little bit about how deterrence works. But there are still any number of tools in the toolkit, if you like, that we've yet to use. Sabrina mentioned the initiative that has been proposed to not only freeze Russian assets, but to seize those assets and redistribute those assets to the victims of Russian aggression in Ukraine. And that's actually quite possible as it is. Something like half of Russia's foreign reserves, it's within the capacity of the G7 countries to seize those reserves and redistribute them, to take them away from Russia. About a year or so ago, there was an initiative. People like Alan Rock and Lloyd Axworthy and Peter MacKay, Michael Ignatieff were trying to establish, they had this idea of establishing in Canada something that looked a little bit like the International Criminal Court, that would work a little bit like Magnitsky sanctions, but would do just that. That these oligarchs and kleptocrats would have their assets seized, not just frozen, and redistributed to the victims of their criminal behavior. So I think there's a lot that we could be doing now. There's still a lot that we could be doing, you know, sanctioning Vladimir Putin's girlfriend, whatever. You know, we really do have to face up to the fact that, and I hope the penny drops soon, that this is a lot more serious than people think. And we can't allow Putin to, you know, or we can't allow ourselves to think, well, you know, Ukraine's not a NATO country, so we can't risk nuclear war. Well, what if he invaded a NATO country? The argument would be the same. We can't risk nuclear war.
Biden's line of late has been that caving into aggression would be more costly than the $33 billion that he's putting forward. And that's a kind of an echo of JFK's famous line from the Cuban Missile Crisis that the greatest danger of all would be to do nothing.
Yeah.
So while I agree with you, Terry, that the nuclear argument has been sort of overplayed from the Russian side, that they're it seems to be something they believe works to divide the West. I think it does work to divide the West. I'm told that the NATO allies are now sitting down talking about what they would do in the event that a tactical nuclear weapon was dropped. And clearly the Germans and other European countries that might be in the front lines of that are very nervous about it. But so are the Canadians. And I just wonder what you think about Canada's performance. Have we, I think it'd be too much to say we've covered ourselves in glory, but have we at least done the decent thing as allies? Sabrina?
I think we've done as much as can be expected of us militarily. Of course, it's no secret Canada's not a great military power. We're never going to be, you know, on the scale of what the U.S. can do or even other European giants can do in terms of helping in military aid. Where I think we could go further, though, is in the financial sector, where when it comes to sanctions, and not just sanctions, but actually enforcing sanctions. Canada has a terrible track record of sanctions enforcement. Since 1992, we've only charged 2 people with evading sanctions, and only one of those actually went to trial. So if there's no punishment to go with the sanction, it's like a parent counting to 10, but nothing happens when you get to 10, they just keep counting. So there are loopholes in our own system that we need to address if we really want to be a partner in the way we should be to Ukraine and other nations that are dealing with aggression and human rights crises. Additionally, we also have a huge corruption problem in Canada, and whether it's Russian oligarchs or whether it's kleptocrats from other nations, this is an ongoing problem. It's been known for a long time, and it's something we have to deal with, or we're going to keep enabling and empowering these bad actors around the world.
What do you think, Terry?
That was a lot what was on everybody's mind a year ago when Axworthy and Rock and McKay and Ignatia were proposing the International Corruption Court. And I think really what the motivation there was my gosh, Canada really needs to go deep to do something about its reputation, as you describe. And this idea was I think to address that as much as anything else.
Okay, we're running very short in time, but I do want to mention a story that Terry you wrote about, which I didn't know anything about, and I think it deserves a wider audience. The curious case of Khalid Barakat. Can you just give us quickly the gist of what happened there?
Well, this actually does play into, or it spins off what Sabrina was saying about people coming in and out of this country as though we don't have an immigration department and nobody's really paying any attention. Khalid Barakat is, according to the Israeli intelligence agencies, Shin Bet, Mossad, and so on, a member of the Central Committee of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. And he has been in and out of Vancouver, mostly Vancouver. He spent a few years in Germany since about 2003. He is intimately associated with what the Israelis call a proxy organization as well of the PFLP called Samadun. And that organization last February was listed specifically in its own right as a terrorist organization, a function of the PFLP, but an independent listing of Samadun as a terrorist organization. And 3 days later, Samadun was given a formal recognition as a federal not-for-profit corporation in Canada. And the Israelis and Jewish advocacy organizations have been very quiet about this. It came to me in January, and I've been sort of trying to figure it out and dealing with it off the side of my desk. There's a lot of really difficult and sensitive stuff to confirm here. But yeah, at the moment, Barakat is fighting an order by the German courts disallowing him from entry into Germany for 4 years. Samadun's partner organization in France just last month was dissolved by an order of the President Macron. I think there's really something wrong with citizenship and immigration, public safety, all of these issues about dirty money entering the country, sketchy individuals coming in and out of the country. You know, it just seems to be broken. And the Afghan experience speaks of that. The difficulties that Ukrainians are having filling out forms, trying to get to Canada. There's something really broken at the senior levels there.
For sure. So, I mean, you got a guy who's banned in Germany, organization banned in France, identified with a terrorist organization that advocates resistance by any means necessary, alter ego organization is legally registered as a not-for-profit, operates with complete impunity in Canada. Am I missing anything? I mean, Sabrina, last word to you. What do you think that says about, what does it say about Canada that it turns a blind eye to such behavior?
Yeah, it should be a shocking story, but for anyone who follows this sort of story, it's really not. Unfortunately, it's closer to a regular occurrence in Canada. First, we became a haven for money laundering, and then for transnational cartels, specifically the fentanyl trade, and that's gone also into terrorist financing. They're all related, and it comes down to the fact that we don't know who's coming into the country, we don't know who's here, and we don't know who owns what in the country, which has resulted in major problems. And often these aren't even people who are, deep undercover or hiding their identities. They're wanted by other nations around the world, or they're banned from other nations around the world. So the question is, why can we not do the same?
Great stuff. Well, listen, guys, thanks very much for that stimulating discussion. Hope to have you back.
Thank you.
Nice seeing you guys.